A kindly tongue is the lodestone of the hearts of men. It is the bread of the Spirit. It clotheth the words with meaning. It is the fountain of the light of wisdom and understanding. Baha'u'llah. For the tongue is a smoldering fire, and excess of speech a deadly poison. Material fire consumeth the body, whereas the fire of the tongue devoureth both heart and soul. The force of the former lasteth but for a time, whilst the effects of the latter endureth a century. Baha'u'llah. Every word is endowed with a spirit. Therefore, the speaker or expounder should carefully deliver his words at the appropriate time and place, for the impression which each word maketh is clearly evident and perceptible. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. So today we're really happy to have Dr. Nancy Lee Harper and Mr. Barron Harper, and they'll be talking about the power of your words. Barron Harper is a graduate of the University of North Texas, where he earned a master's degree in accounting in 1985. He's an international tax accountant for U.S. expatriates. A Baha'i since 1967, he and his wife Nancy pioneered to Argentina in 1975 and later to Portugal in 1992. Over the years, Mr. Harper has served on local and national Baha'i institutions. He's written 2 books on the hands of the cause, Lights of Fortitude and Unfurling the Divine Standard, as well as produced some 30 articles on various subjects for BahaiTeachings.org and El Ruisenor. Nancy Lee Harper is an international pianist and educator. Described as an extraordinarily multi-talented American musician and scholar, Dr. Harper has performed or taught on 4 continents and in 29 countries. She's authored several books, over 250 scientific articles, recorded many CDs, and is currently working on a comprehensive biography of Hand of the Cause of God, Amelia Engelder Collins. She and Barron reside on Vancouver Island, Canada, have many children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So with that, I'll hand it off to you guys.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's wonderful to be here with you. And I have to applaud the creators of this wonderful program, the Baha'i Faith Modern Perspectives, because the Baha'i Faith is indeed modern. It has many far-reaching teachings, which we still would benefit by implementing if we could. I'm glad to see that we're all on the same page, because we're opening with this same quote that was first read, and before that, that was sung. You may think that this is a modern topic, but we're going to find that it is indeed an ancient one. So everyone is beset by constant messages, both in the digital and political realms, and it has quite an effect upon us. We are being bombarded. Some are visual, some are verbal, or a combination of both. The Baha'i Faith, born in 1844, has much to say about the power of our words and the effect on ourselves and others, and so do other religions.
Yes, very important, and we will explore some religious teachings about the power of words, how to use words to have meaningful conversations, how to use words to accompany one another, and how to use words to consult.
So before we begin, we'll just give you a little bit of history about the Baha'i Faith in case you don't know it, so that when I'm referring or you see the name of the author of one of the quotations, you may identify it. The Baha'i Faith was born in 1844 when the Bab, whose name means the gate, declared that this is a new day and that one after him would soon come. That would be Baha'u'llah, the glory of God. This faith was born in Persia in the middle of the 19th century, and during his short lifetime, the Bab actually revealed 5 million words, and Baha'u'llah later 7 million words. Baha'u'llah's son, Abdu'l-Baha, which means the servant of the glory, wrote approximately 27,000 tablets and books. His grandson, Shoghi Effendi Rabbani, wrote more than 26,000 letters, cables, and other writings, including books and translations of the holy writings. And since 1963, we have had ongoing guidance from the Universal House of Justice elected in that year. So we're going to start now with just a brief look at some of the similarities amongst the major religions.
Attributed to the Buddha, one should not pry into the faults of others. Things left undone or done by others, but one's own deeds done and undone.
From the Jewish religion, there is a saying called Lashon Hara. It is a Hebrew term that translates to evil speech or slander. It refers to the act of speaking negatively about someone, even if the information is true. Lashon Hara includes any speech that can harm another person's reputation, feelings, or relationships. This can be direct statements, insinuations, or even body language. It is considered Lashon Hara even if the speaker does not intend to harm, as the impact on the subject and the listener is what matters.
The Talmud teaches that Lashon Hara can be as damaging as physical harm. It compares speaking ill of someone to murder because it can destroy a person's reputation and social standing.
We also find a similar concept to this in the Baha'i faith. From the Bible, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God.
Under Ephesians 4:31 and 4:29, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen.
From Luke 6:41, and why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but perceivest not the beam that is in thine own? Again, we see this in the Baha'i faith and the teachings.
In the Quran, Surah 49:12, O ye who have believed, avoid much negative assumption. Indeed, some assumption is sin, and do not spy or backbite each other.
From the Surah 49:11, and find not faults with one another, neither revile one another by nicknames. From the Baha'i faith,
Baha'u'llah teaches, for the tongue is a smoldering fire, an excess of speech a deadly poison. Material fire consumeth the body, whereas the fire of the tongue devoureth both heart and soul. Verily I say, the tongue is for mentioning that which is good. Pollute it not with evil speech. Backbiting quencheth the light of the heart, and extinguisheth the life of the soul.
Abdul-Baha says, beware lest ye harm any soul, or make any heart to sorrow, lest ye wound any man with your words, be he known to you or a stranger, be he friend or foe. Follow thou the way of thy Lord, and say not that which the ears cannot bear to hear. For such speech is like luscious food given to small children. However palatable, rare and rich the food may be, it cannot be assimilated. So we can see the recurring thread through the major religions about the power of our words and the importance of consideration of how we use our words and the effect not only on us, but especially on others. So in this second part of our presentation, we go to meaningful conversations. In any conversation, we have a choice of what we're going to say. And sometimes it's very challenging because sometimes people will bring things up that are very politically motivated or very personally motivated to the point perhaps of backbiting. And it's sometimes difficult to know how to react. So we're going to talk about some examples. I think one of the most beautiful examples that this can teach us is by Abdu'l-Bahá, the perfect example, I think, when he speaks of His Holiness Christ.
He says, "May my life be a sacrifice to him." One day, accompanied by his apostles, he passed by the corpse of a dead animal. One of them said, "How putrid has this animal become?" The other exclaimed, "How it is deformed." A third one cried out, "What a stench! How cadaverous looking!" But His Holiness Christ said, "Look at its teeth, how white they are."
Consider that he did not look at all at the defects of the animal. Nay, rather he searched well until he found the beautiful white teeth. He observed only the whiteness of the teeth and overlooked entirely the deformity of the body, the dissolution of its organs, and the bad odor. This is the attribute of the children of the kingdom. This is the conduct and the manner of the real Baha'is. I hope that all the believers will attain to this lofty station. So this is our example for having a meaningful conversation. And again, from Abdu'l-Bahá, he gives us more guidance about avoiding backbiting and negative thoughts. We know that our words are preceded by our thoughts, so backbiting begins within our own selves, within our heads, if you will, or our hearts. Abdu'l-Bahá says,
"I will tell you, whenever you recognize the fault of another, think of yourself. What are my imperfections? Do this whenever you are tired through the words or deeds of others. Thus you will grow, become more perfect. You will overcome self. You will not even have time to think of the faults of others."
what wonderful advice. He gives us further advice. One must see in every human being only that which is worthy of praise. When this is done, one can be a friend to the whole human race. If, however, we look at people from the standpoint of their faults, then being a friend to them is a formidable task. Thus, it is incumbent upon us when we direct our gaze toward other people to see where they excel, not where they fail.
And the Universal House of Justice says, "You ask in your letter for guidance on the implications of the prohibitions on backbiting, and more specifically, whether in moments of anger or depression, the believer is permitted to turn to his friends to unburden his soul and discuss his problem in human relations. Normally, it is possible to describe the situation surrounding a problem and seek help and advice in resolving it without necessarily mentioning names. The individual believer should seek to do this, whether he is consulting a friend, Baha'i or non-Baha'i, or whether the friend is consulting him."
Good advice. We're going to have now a very short 2-minute video on the effects of our words, an experiment by a young girl. And I think we'll talk about it after you see it. It's a very powerful short video. True story.
and the leaves are like yellow. I don't think that's good.
11-year-old Samantha Petragli and her mom are still trying to nurse this dead plant back to life after the 5th graders class killed it, and not with kindness.
I feel sad about the bullies plant because I don't like to see anything die.
For her science fair project this year, the Comac girl and her mom bought 2 of the same types of plants from the same nursery. Both were then placed on the same windowsill inside her classroom.
This way it was even. They had the same amount of water, the same amount of sunlight.
The only difference, one was verbally complimented every day by Samantha's classmates, and the other was bullied. Students tracked it all by a checklist.
So the rules were, with bullying the plant, say mean things to it. Call the plant ugly, call the plant fat, call the plant stupid.
The plant that was bullied began to wilt right away, and after just 6 days, it died, while the one that received compliments continued to grow.
If bullying a plant for just 6 days basically kills it, imagine bullying a child.
Last year, the furniture company IKEA conducted a similar experiment as a public service announcement against bullying, getting the same result. According to the Long Island Coalition Against Bullying, 68.4% of Long Island middle school students expressed they were bullied in school. Samantha says she's one of them, which prompted her to do this experiment.
I like that it shows how bullying can wear you down and hurt you and hurt your feelings.
There's no concrete proof that the science project actually worked, but for this Comac family, they're happy it at least served as a teaching tool. Allie Bauman, CBS 2 News.
So just imagine when we use those same words towards ourselves, self-hate, if you will. And we can discuss that a little bit later.
I'll just say, could you reshare your PowerPoint because it's not shared right now?
Oh, you can't see it. Okay, sure. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, and I was saying, imagine the effect of those kinds of words on ourselves, to ourselves, very, very detrimental. So we're going to talk a little bit about some solution. This is one person's solution, and I thought it was quite good because we all need help. We get in these situations when someone's really bashing somebody else, and it's sometimes very difficult to know what to do. Do we walk away? We have a child, our oldest used to say, when somebody started to backbite, tell it to the hand, and he would walk away. And I said, boy, he's got guts to do that. So another person gave this solution. Recognize when a conversation is turning towards praising or criticizing someone we do or don't know well, and then rerouting the conversation if it is being that. Still speak out about social injustice, but try to look at what should be done and avoid limited focus on what others have done.
And remember and verbally acknowledge that even the most problematic people are, in part, fruits of a wider problem within our society. Taking emphasis off of individual wrongdoings allows us to employ more effective solutions. I catch myself in my conversations with friends and family about what is stressing me out and try not to talk about others in judgmental ways. Though it may be a difficult shift in behavior and thought, it's possible to ask for the support and advice without falling to judgment.
So these are some ways that one person handles a situation. There's another one that comes out of the Virtues Project, and I really, really love this. Some of you may be familiar with that, but there's a definite language of the Virtues Project, and it's sometimes taught in the schools. It was here in British Columbia for a number of years. It was actually developed, I understand, on Salt Spring Island. by some Baha'is, and one being a psychologist who really wanted to help people. So the process, while I'm not an expert in this, Barry and I will try to show you an example of how it might work. There are many other ways, and the more proficient you become in the language of the virtues, the better you will become at doing the companioning process. So I say to Barry, what's happening? And then I'm quiet.
Then I respond that, oh, my friend Jose is bad-mouthing my former girlfriend, Maria.
Your former girl. I'm not supposed to say that. I'm sorry.
And it's very hurtful, and I'm not sure what to say or do about that. I just feel like I'm almost like a victim being made to listen to his browbeating.
And what's that like for you?
It dampens my spirit, and I think that it increases the sense of animosity in my friend toward my former girlfriend.
And what's the hardest part of all that?
Well, I think the hardest part is what kind of a reaction can I have to improve the situation?
And what would give you the courage to improve that situation?
Well, I could go hit him over the head, but probably won't do that. But if I could just go to him and say something like, you know, when you say that, it makes me feel, and I wonder how it makes you feel. Is it maybe not the best kind of thinking and conversation to be portraying?
What's been helpful in our conversation, and what's clearer now?
Well, I think it's just clear that I need to have the courage to go to my friend and speak out, because nothing will be gained or accomplished by keeping silent.
I hear your loyalty to your friend, and I admire your courage for doing that. So that's just one example of the companioning process. There are as many examples as there are people. Another way we use our words, and hopefully constructively, is in consultation. The Baha'is have a wonderful tool in consultation, and we're going to study it just briefly here. From the Universal House of Justice, they say, consultation is no easy skill to learn, requiring, as it does, the subjugation of all egotism and unruly passions, the cultivation of frankness and freedom of thought, as well as courtesy, openness of mind, and wholehearted acquiescence in a majority decision.
The prime requisites to consultation: purity of motive, radiance of spirit, detachment, attraction, humility, patience,
Certitude.
servitude. This is by the Shoghi Effendi, the grandson of Abdul Baha that was mentioned before. And then further requisites: utmost love, harmony, and sincerity from Abdul Baha, calmness and composure. Finally, utmost devotion, courtesy, dignity, care, and moderation to express their views.
So you can see that under heated circumstances, this would not be easy and requires a great deal of maturity. Baha'u'llah says, beware. And in any of this process, beware. He must never seek to exalt himself above anyone, must wash away from the tablet of his heart every trace of pride and vainglory, must cling unto patience and resignation, observe silence, and refrain from idle talk. How difficult that can be sometimes. Abdul Baha, from the Promulgation of Universal Peace,
Says man should weigh his opinions with the utmost serenity, calmness, and composure, Before expressing his own views, he should carefully consider the views already advanced by others. If he finds that a previously expressed opinion is more true and worthy, he should accept it immediately and not willfully hold to an opinion of his own. By this excellent method, he endeavors to arrive at unity and truth.
So often we feel we have to express our own opinion, even if a previously expressed opinion is more true and worthy. That's a sign of egotism, I think. Shoghi Effendi, who has a marvelous way of writing in the English language, says about Baha'i consultation. This type of consultation requires high levels of emotional and intellectual maturity and high spiritual, moral, and ethical standards from its participants. The main objective of Baha'i consultation, therefore, is to bring about circumstances in which the seemingly contradictory principles of mercy and justice, of freedom and submission, of the sanctity of the right of the individual, and of self-surrender, of vigilance, discretion, and prudence on the one hand, and fellowship, candor, and courage on the other, are reconciled and human conflicts are resolved in a creative manner, with the constant goal of searching out truth and not becoming prey to the forces of prejudice, ignorance, self-interest, or mistrust. We could summarize Baha'i consultation, which is a unique process, as these following steps. There's always a preparation, both spiritual and emotional, that occur. Some groups like to meditate first and then do prayers. Then an establishment of mutual trust, frank and non-aggressive participation. Abdu'l-Baha tells us it is through the clash of differing opinions that the spark of truth is known. There is the collective consideration of ideas, the non-personalization of ideas. The problem is defined.
Gathering possible solutions follows. Refinement of solution, process of reaching a consensus, humble submission to the will of the majority, very important, and collective and affirmative action.
Now, sometimes the minds and hearts of those who are consulting are in accord, and the spontaneous solution will arise. If they are in accord and they implement that solution and it is successful, they will know it's the right one. If it's not successful, then they go back and consult again. So it's a really marvelous process. I think the hardest thing is getting clear on what are we discussing and getting our egos out of the equation. A wonderful psychiatrist from Canada whom we had the privilege of knowing in Switzerland when he was at Landegg Academy was Dr. Hosseina Danish, and you may very well know his book, The Psychology of Spirituality. He was very successful in working with peace projects in Bosnia and around that area. One thing he pointed out is their purpose is to seek out the truth about the object of their deliberation and to find ways and means in which the individual and societal needs for justice, equality, freedom, and progress are met.
They also deliberate on ways human conflicts can be resolved without the abuse of power or the manipulation or denial and violation of human rights of any people, whether or not they are directly involved in these consultative processes.
So in other words, if you're dealing with a group and maybe they're atheistic and they would not believe in prayer or God, or as you know, in some societies, you're not allowed to mention God or have prayer in the schools or whatever, then these are a few steps that you can still take to find justice and truth, realizing the importance of not manipulating or denying or violating the human rights of any people. One thing we have here in Canada is the traditional territorial acknowledgement, and that's the closest to prayer in the schools that you will get to at this point. So consultation is a marvelous tool for within the family. Some of the same principles that we see as a body can also be followed in the family, such as preparing to consult by prayer or meditation or both. So each family member, we recognize as Baha'is, has a role and a responsibility within the family. Abdu'l-Baha says, it is in no wise permissible for one to belittle the thought of another. Nay, he must with moderation set forth the truth. And how often have we seen within families, people will belittle each other. Often brothers and sisters put each other down. And those kinds of attitudes remain sometimes for a lifetime. Going on further, family consultation employing full and frank discussion and animated by awareness of the need for moderation and balance can be the panacea for domestic conflict.
And from selections of writings of Abdu'l-Baha, note ye how easily, where unity existeth in a given family, the affairs of that family make how they prosper in the world. Their concerns are in order. They enjoy comfort and tranquility. They are secure. Their position is assured. They come to be envied by all. Such a family but addeth to its stature and its lasting honor, as day succeedeth day.
And I would say that you see an example of this unified family right by the hosts of this program and their desire to serve. Non-Baha'is also have recognized the importance of our words being selected wisely. Barack Obama said, it's important to make sure that we're talking with each other in a way that heals, not in a way that wounds.
And Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
So basically, you have a choice with your words. You have a choice with the way you think. You have a choice with what you do. One study found that an average person has about 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. And of these, 80% are negative. And 95% are repetitive thoughts. So my goodness, we have a lot of work to do, don't we? There's something in the Baha'i faith that's quite wonderful. Since we don't have priests to confess to, we have to call ourselves to account each day and see what have we done that was good and what could have been better. And in this way, we try to grow spiritually. So it's a wonderful tool as well. So we come to our final thoughts.
The sign of the intellect is contemplation, and the sign of contemplation is silence, because it is impossible for man to do two things at one time. He cannot both speak and meditate.
So before I go to the final slide, one thing I want to point out, it is we humans who have the power of utterance. The animal kingdom, the plants, they communicate, but they don't have the power of utterance in the way that we do. So our words are very important. Our words matter. Abdu'l-Baha, a final word from him. One must see in every human being only that which is worthy of praise. When this is done, one can be a friend to the whole human race. If, however, we look at the people from the standpoint of their faults, then being a friend to them is a formidable task.
And from Baha'u'llah, verily I say, the tongue is for mentioning what is good. Defile it not with unseemly talk. God hath forgiven what is past. Henceforward, everyone should utter that which is meet and seemly, and should refrain from slander, abuse, and whatever causeth sadness in men. Lofty is the station of man.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing, and I believe now we will have some questions and answers, hopefully.
Yes, thank you so much. Let me stop your screen.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really necessary talk. And now we have time for questions and answers. So people can put their questions in the chat and we will have time to have those answered.
They're contemplating the silence.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're putting that into action. Maybe I'll start off with a question. So the Baha'i writings, as you said, emphasize the importance of speaking with kindness and wisdom. So how can we strike a balance between being direct while also being gentle and compassionate?
Who wants to answer that question?
My studies of the prominent persons in the faith known as hands of the cause, we often read that they were very direct, saying what needed to be said. Abdu'l-Baha talks about if we don't mention to a person that's committed a wrongdoing, bring that person to an account, that the person will think that he's gotten away with it and will just perpetuate that kind of behavior. So justice really says that we should be direct, but in being direct, we don't have to be cruel. We can be kind and show tenderness and compassion toward the person that we're addressing.
I think also that last question of the accompanying process of the virtues project. So we use a virtue to say, we give them a question back and we say, someone is saying something perhaps negative, and we say, I hear that you're upset, or I hear that you're concerned. I hear you're, you see this as an injustice. So we give it back to them, and that lets them open their hearts, and we can then try to, as Barry said, make it clear to them about truth and justice. Because if we don't, it's also an injustice, isn't it?
Thank you. And there's another question. How do we deal with injustices such as racism in a way that we make changes but also at the same time not focusing on the negative?
And we had a quote about that, and her personal solution. And I believe that's where the example was, so that we can give generalities about social injustices and point that out. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we can also give specific solutions about what maybe the community is doing to help with this, or to say to that person, thank you for pointing out the need for this. Really depends on the situation, I think.
I have a friend years ago when I was a young Baha'i, and we were in East Texas, and it was an area where segregation was pretty rampant. And I remember that this lady, she was a person of the white race, met up with a person of the black race, and they walked hand in hand, literally linking arms down this street in this segregated neighborhood. And so I think back on that experience and what I witnessed, that sometimes the best teaching toward racism is example. leading, showing the example of linking arms, if you will.
And that was in the 60s, was it?
It was in the early
70s?
70s. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I see our friends Sheila and Alex. How wonderful. Thank you. Alex is asking about staying silent. Well, I'm not a very good example of that. So, I'm still working on that one, Alex. What is it? He said, count to 5 or count to 20 before you say anything. Pinch yourself, and think about it before you open your mouth. Yeah, it's really, really hard for me anyway. Not for you so much. My husband's a master. Maybe he should answer that. We're quite different, as you can see. I think that's why we stayed married so long.
She'll say something, and then a year
No,
later I'll
don't
say,
tell,
"What
don't
did
tell."
you say?"
Yeah.
There's another question specifically, how do you deal with, challenging people at work who might be backbiting, putting you down, bad mouthing other people?
That's a good one, especially if it's the boss.
Right. I think Barry said it really well. Go to that person and say, relieve me of this, That's extremely hard to do in my experience.
That was Mr.
Fazy.
Abulkasim Faizi that gave that advice. And he said that this aspect of backbiting begins within the individual, which Nancy brought out. And so it spins around in the heart, if you will, and it feeds on resentment. But Mr. Faizi said feeds on suspicion. To suspect the person that you're thinking negatively about as being guilty of some action. And people behave sometimes in mean ways, deliberately or accidentally. They may be under stress or circumstances, and they don't really intend to be mean-spirited. But he said to go to that person, have the courage to go to that person and say, look, when you said such and such or acted in such and such a way, this is what I felt. Can you relieve me of this? And okay, the person will either comply, because Mr. Faizi would have said this in a very loving way. The person will either comply or not. The person, sometimes they become resentful. And so in that case, what do? We leave that person to God, and we say prayers for the sake of that individual and trust that in time there'll be a change affected by the step taken of having gone to that person.
Thank you. There's another question that says, in one of the early quotes mentioned from a previous religion is that assumptions can be a sin. Can you elaborate on this?
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on this, and maybe the translation of the word as assumptions might mean something else. But we do often assume things of people by their words or their behavior or by the culture. And there are often many cultural misunderstandings. And how do we get over that? So if we assume things, which we all do, we make judgments and we assume things. And my husband will say to me, Nancy, that's not what I'm feeling or thinking at all. And he said, well, you look like it. And he'll say, no, you've misread, you've misunderstood. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. So I don't, maybe it's just that we put our own judgment on something, and maybe that's something we shouldn't do. Maybe that's what that assumption means. We do discriminate, and that's an important intellectual power of the Holy Spirit, as I understand it. And it's important to discriminate, but to judge maybe is only left to God.
Thank you. How do we reconcile the guidance to forget the problems and just focus on serving with the guidance to confront challenges that are constantly presenting themselves to us?
Well, I think Barry's already mentioned a couple of instances. Sometimes there's a place to forget it and there's a place not to forget it. Yeah. It would be an injustice if you didn't. So you want to address that?
Yeah, it's just kind of what I said before, is that yes, we have to make judgments when we're in situations of how to deal with somebody behaving in such a way that is questionable, or uncertain, or we feel like is disunifying. And so what is our reaction going to be? Is it the time and the place? Baha'u'llah talks about the timing of saying things, is sometimes that we just have to make a judgment as to the best time according to the sensitivity of the situation. But certainly, if at all possible, we should try to help bring a person to an account in a loving way. And if it doesn't seem appropriate to do that, or if we try to do it and it doesn't achieve a desired result, then again, we leave the person to God, and we put them on our prayer list and move on. On the other hand, if somebody is disrupting a meeting, maybe we should remove the person from the facility. It's not an injustice either.
No, it's a justice to the group if you were to do that, I think.
Yeah.
Oh. I've certainly known people whose tongues are really quite honey filled, They often praise people, they look at their positive qualities. Certainly my own mother was that way. And she was so encouraging. And I think if we consider, can we make the world a little bit better? How can we work for the betterment of society? Sometimes just by increasing awareness of the power of our words is a really powerful thing that we can do. Just sometimes a smile, a kind word. You don't know what that person's going through that day. It's a tough world we live in.
Thank you.
Does anybody remember the story of this man that was on a New York subway years ago, and he had 3 children that were screaming and just going wild. He just sat there ignoring them, and it was disrupting the peace of the passengers. And finally, one man decided to bring that person to account. By golly, I'm going to say, you need to take care of your kids. What's the matter with you? And the person, the father, suddenly he became conscious of surroundings, like he'd been off in a dream world. And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, my wife just died."
Thank you. There's another question. So you talked about the quote, the tongue is a smoldering fire, and excess of speech a deadly poison. And material fire consumeth the body, whereas the fire of the tongue devoureth both heart and soul. The question is, how do we hold ourselves accountable for the impact of our speech, even when we speak with good intentions, but unintentionally cause harm?
I think one has to have humility and apologize if one has hurt another person and express one's intention. It was never that. It was trying to find, an element of truth in the situation, or express one's own conviction of what was true for you,
There's a story that the wife of the guardian, Mary Maxwell by birth, Ria Khanum, the name known to Baha'is, and wrote this book about her husband. Said that when Shoghi Effendi was a boy, if he had hurt the feelings of one of his friends, he couldn't rest until he went to that person to make it right. And I think that's a very good example for all of us. We should strive to make it right. Somebody, and again, you can't succeed 100% of the time, but we do our best, and in doing our best, we trust in God, and ultimately, doing our best depends upon purity of motive. I think that trying to make things right with a person comes from that sense of purity.
So don't go to bed angry. Some wonderful things in the chat.
Yeah, there's another question. How do you balance between not dwelling on the unpleasant things of life and being anxiously concerned with the exigencies of the time you live in?
I think service is the greatest tool that we have. Just get out there and do something. And you know you've tried, you put it in God's hands. And we have the consultation if we're working in our communities to see, can a project be better? Can it be wider? Can it reach more people? Or maybe just this small step will have such an impact that it will have, be the ripple that will go out into the water that will reach others. That's just my feeling. I don't know.
We had a correspondence years ago from the wife of one of these hands of the cause, John Robards. This is Audrey Robards, and she said something like that: when you're bowed down with difficulties, go find somebody to teach, and that, in other words, that will change your whole mood. And Abdu'l-Bahá says that the divine assistance comes to those who are involved in teaching the faith.
And I think we shouldn't forget that the manifestations themselves were so sorrowful at times that they couldn't move. The tears that they shed, they kept them from extolling God. But this is part of the human existence, even though they were stationed much higher than ours. But service, service, service.
Okay, there's another question. What effect does self-criticism and extreme conscientiousness have on how we speak and communicate with others, and how might one improve on that?
Well, I'm not a psychologist for sure. I do think it's a step-by-step thing, an awareness. As we saw with a plant, just in 6 days, it began to just wither. And I do volunteer work in something called the English Corner here in Victoria. And I just love it because we have so many newcomers from so many different countries. And there's this gorgeous woman who came with her daughter, who was very courageous to come here on her own, left an unhappy marriage and is making a new life for themselves. And she said one day, I really don't like myself. And I was totally shocked. And I thought, how can this gorgeous woman not like herself? Someone has put her down and told her she's not worthy, she's not noble, she's not capable. And through these hardships, I hope, and that and through encouragement, I think she's making great strides. So I'm not sure I answered the question. I just was thinking of this precious soul that we see from time to time and how she's growing. I think our societies impose a great deal of negativity on us. Just look at all the ads we're exposed to, the materialism. And the Guardian himself said the greatest enemy of the faith is materialism. But when we go out and serve, we forget ourselves. Abdu'l-Bahá said the mystery of sacrifice is there is no sacrifice. We change. We change when we go out and we serve and we sacrifice. And then all of these things we get a different perspective on them. Yeah. I know we have tragedies in our lives, and grief is part of our life. I know that. But we have to rely upon God and say, My calamity is my providence. Outward it is fire and vengeance, but inwardly it is light and mercy. So if this is tough right now, it's because I need to learn something from it, and I'm growing. And I pray for the strength to go through whatever the test is.
Under the kind of the long view, in this day and age of so many difficulties and so much criticism and
Hatred.
well, this unity and denying people the ability to manifest their God-given attributes and qualities. The Baha'u'llah says that each child is potentially the light of the world. And that's really a profound statement. So what it says is that we need to be turning attention gradually toward the education materially and spiritually of our children, and be striving to change this world from one of competition to one of cooperation, where everyone has an opportunity to grow and develop and serve. Because what happens is that in a society that is critical is that we feel put down, like Nancy says, and so it feeds into our psyche that we are not worthy of certain things, and so we go into this mode of self-criticizing, and that's reinforced by the consequent emotions that boil up from that, and it's a revolving circle, and it's difficult to get out of that when we're down into the ditches of self-criticism and even self-pity. There was a prayer that goes something like, I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. And Abdu'l-Baha talks about how when we have a negative thought, we should counteract it with a positive. Of course, he gave examples of different kinds of negativity. But I think it's a very powerful consideration. And we see in the world today the so-called gurus of positive think. And they've got some very valid points, is that we need to be learning how to think more positively of ourselves, which in turn will help us to behave more affirmatively.
I think there's a thing called spiritual gravity, if you will. We have our higher nature and our lower nature, and it's just so easy to revert to the lower nature. And it's a daily battle. That's why in the Baha'i faith we have certain practices such as obligatory prayer and bringing ourselves to account and other prayers. So it's just part of this human plane that we have these dual natures, and we do have choices. Sometimes our emotions are so strong that we are pulled down by them. And I think that's only human, grief is a great thing. And it's hard to overcome, but we try. That's all we can do is try. And depression's another one. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. That's really horrible. And well, my area is music, but I know, thank God I have music. It gives me such joy and uplifts my spirit. Yeah. And it's the same with our words. Be careful what you listen to, because it has a powerful effect.
Thank you. Do you believe it's important to find the beauty within and not to believe the ugly things that come from without? In other words, why do we believe the cruel, oftentimes totally untrue things people say?
Well, it's often sensationalism, isn't it? And I think everybody probably tends to love a little bit of gossip and to know it's dramatic. Sometimes life is mundane and you just want to hear something different. But I think that's a real serious poison, and you have to be on guard to not let it seep into you, your thoughts and your being, and to counteract it with counter questions. Were you there? Did you experience this? Maybe I should go to the person themselves, and if possible. We began this presentation by saying we're bombarded every day with all these messages, and if you listen to the news, it's overwhelming, and yet we want to stay informed, don't we? So there are some news platforms that will present all sides, not just one, and that might be a solution. But I think the question was, do you believe it is important to find the beauty within and not to believe the ugly things that come from without? I think we can't deny there are many ugly things. We wouldn't know the beauty, right? We wouldn't know the light unless we had dark. So you can't deny that. You can't just go around in a bubble and say, oh, isn't life beautiful all the time, et cetera, et cetera. But we have to have our feet on the ground and understand that we do have these dual natures, and there are constant forces of light and dark at work. And Mr. Dunbar wrote that wonderful book, and he named something like 60 different forces of negativity, like despair and so forth, depression. Let's see, I don't know if I have the book here.
No.
Oh, you took it? Yeah, maybe. I was looking at it the other day because I wanted to view those negative forces. But if you don't have the book, it might be a good one to look at again.
Forces of Light and Darkness.
Yeah. So no, I mean, we have to acknowledge these things are real and they exist, but we don't have to give them energy, except to combat them. We don't have to internalize them.
Thank you.
Oh, someone is saying I'm specifically referring to bullying. I'm referring specifically to bullying. Bullying is a real social disease. And I think another tool that might be helpful, and we were talking about the news, would be to look at what does the Baha'i World News Service have to offer at this time. And we were talking about bullying. There is a recent example. Just the other day I was reading about the Baha'is in Mexico are using the idea of service for gang members. And just one small step to get their thinking changed, to do something positive instead of destructive for the world. So this was on Baha'i World News Service. So if you're going to watch news and it's negative, maybe you watch something positive by going to Baha'i World News Service or something. Oh, my husband's just come up with the book. Thank you. Let me see if I can find. Would you like to hear a list of those?
On the cover.
I will do that. Yeah. Can you see this book? Yeah, you probably know it. If not, it's available from George Ronald in Oxford. And the dark forces from the writings Mr. Hooper Dunbar has identified are conditions that appear in humanity when it turns away from God. Irreligion, atheism, naturalism, unbelief, secularism, and paganism. Shoghi Effendi also names other dark forces of a wayward humanity when it worships in place of God, such as materialism, nationalism, racialism, and communism. And Shoghi Effendi conveys the perversions of religion with another set of terms, among them being fanaticism and superstition. Still, other dark forces are the consequences of humanity's losing the moral compass provided by living religion, such as prejudice, corruption, immorality, moral laxity, and widespread lawlessness, for example. The Guardian also says dark forces include elements which accelerate the decline of humanity's fortunes: violence, disorder, rebellion, revolt, anarchy, disunity, inharmony, separation, schism, disintegration, hatred, suspicion, despair, reaction, and decay. These are the dark forces, whether they're expressed individually in our lives or collectively in the cultures and societies that surround us. They mislead us and keep us from turning to the world of God. And then he gives, in contrast, the forces of light, which I think, yeah. So someone's asking who wrote the book. It's called Forces of Our Time, The Dynamics of Light and Darkness by Hooper C. Dunbar. You want me to put that in the chat or?
I think we got it. Yeah, it's by Hooper Dunbar, The Forces of
Yes. Okay. So these are taken, of course, from the writings of the Guardian, his delineating those forces, negative forces. Yeah.
Thank you. There's another question. It says loneliness and isolation is endemic in cities, and people are losing the capacity to have conversations because their attention is hijacked by social media and entertainment. How might one approach this problem and perhaps initiate conversation?
I think just within the neighborhood, one can start a service project of some sort. Try to start raising awareness. It might be something as simple as sitting on your porch and reading with a child who needs tutoring and reading. Or it might be talking with a friend and say, let's have a neighborhood get together and how can we make our neighborhood better? Just simple things. It doesn't have to be to conquer the world, but it's so true. The loneliness and isolation are rampant. And here too in Canada, it's really terrible. And sometimes people don't even talk to each other when they're walking by each other, you know, and it's just like, oh, you're invisible. It's strange.
Thank you. Well, I think we can end it there. Thank you so much again to both of you for this talk and for answering all of our questions. It's a really important topic. And like I said, this recording will be on our YouTube channel afterwards, so people can rewatch it or share it with their friends who weren't able to make it today.
Well, just know we are not experts. We are people who are trying to be better each day. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity, because it is we who learn by preparing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great blessing. It's quite a service that you're rendering. It's really marvelous.
Thank
I had
you.
no idea personally until Peter Terry told us about what's going on with you.
Yeah. We wish you many more years of this wonderful endeavor.
Thank you so much. So our speaker next Saturday will be Mr. Jason Heiner, and his topic will be, what if Jesus already returned and we missed it? So again, these talks are every Saturday at noon Eastern Daylight Time, and I put the link to our mailing list and our YouTube channel in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Have a good week, and we'll see you.
Thank you.